Welcome to the sounding board. Welcome if you are listening and watching in Australia on our live stream. Hello, how are you doing today? And if you are watching our recorded replay in America, also good evening, because it's also 6 p.m. on Thursday evening for you. How are you doing tonight? Welcome to the sounding board. What is the sounding board? The sounding board is very much the show where you come to ask your questions, send us a message, get involved on this logo just here, the QR code, click that, and drop us what your questions about serverless, about AWS, about anything that's concerning you in AWS, and we can talk about it on this show at some point. Now, what are we talking about today? Well, that's a great question. Today, we're going to be talking about generative AI. Yes, we're going to be talking generative AI and how it's not just about a chatbot. But also, we've got a special guest today. We've got a great community expert who's literally bouncing to come onto the screen right now. His name, you all know him as Mr. Mike Chambers, aka Mr. Gen AI guy, otherwise likes to be known as just Mike.
Mike is fine. Mike is fine. Hello, Alan. Thank you so much for having me on the sounding board.
That's great. No, it's a pleasure to have you here. So from memory, your many titles and hats escape me. Specialist developer advocate, senior developer advocate.
What would you like it to be? Look, I work for Amazon Web Services as a developer advocate, and I work in the field of generative AI. In short, the easiest way to think about it is I have the best job in the world. So there you go. That's me.
And that's one of the things that I like to point out here to many of the watchers, because some of the watchers today here are community builders, heroes, ambassadors, just getting started as well. And that's what I love to hear. I like to see many people, and you've come up through those ranks. You've been a community builder. You've been a hero. You've been a everything.
Yeah, careful. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Look. So, yeah, I do work for AWS. Look, what you just said there, I just want to loop back onto that. Super important. If this is the first time that you've thought about watching a live stream about AWS, then absolutely welcome. Everybody's welcome to this community, right? I mean, I know this isn't my show, but I just want to say that. So, yes, there are people who are going to be in the chat room who are very experienced in AWS. Fantastic. But if this is your first time, then you're very welcome too. So from my perspective, yeah, I work for AWS now, but I've only worked for them for about 19 months, I think, and counting, something like that. But I've been in the AWS community for a long time. I've got gray hairs. So I was one of the first people in the world to get certified in AWS, actually, which I didn't know at the time. But I saw this notification come through that there's a cert, and I was like, oh, I'll go and take that. That should be interesting. So yeah, for about 10, 11 years, something like that, I've been hanging around inside of the AWS community. And I love it. That's why I'm still here.
And that's what we both very much are passionate about, is not just doing our jobs day by day. You work for AWS, I work for an AWS partner. It's about being involved in the community, giving back, giving this information. And that's kind of what I was getting at there. Former AWS heroes. So, you know, at the end of the day,
oh yeah, I did that as
you
well.
got recognized for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
no, that's true.
Look, of the biggest accolades that you've got out there, I think I can tick a box here by saying, be the first person to say that you are a professional tea drinker.
Sure. I do like my cup of tea. That is very true. I'm not so interested in coffee. I do like tea. And it's an easy thing to make, right? You don't need much equipment to make a good cup of tea. That's my contention anyway. Having said that, I don't currently have one in front of me. And yeah, I'm feeling sad now. Never mind.
A show where Mike doesn't drink tea. I'm disappointed.
Yeah,
moving on. You might notice the t-shirt I'm wearing. Mike mentioned he was the first person to be certified, one of many firsts. This t-shirt is available at many summits that are going around the traps at the moment. This is all of the AWS certifications that are available, and you only get this if you pass them all. However, as of yesterday, it's -2.
There are 2 new certifications were announced, right? Yeah, I don't think you can't take them yet. I think you can sign up for interest, but does that mean you have to give your t-shirt back?
I don't know, because that means I might have to give the gold jacket back too, which is
presumably yes. Yeah, I think if you look at the fine print, yeah, you have to give all that back until you've passed the new 2 certifications. Yeah, but again, what are those certifications for those who are not aware?
Yes, so quite topically, the two new certifications are very much all about AI. You've got the AI foundational, so the AI practitioner
Yep.
certification, and then we have the machine learning associate certification that's available. And I believe, according to the website, they'll be available from August for beta registration, and after that, a couple of months will pass by, and we might see them in general availability, and everyone gets excited.
Yeah, definitely excited because this is, I mean, so I don't represent the certification place inside of AWS, but so this is the second practitioner exam, right? Because we've had cloud practitioner for a long time, but this is the first time there's been another one of those. This is at that level a great introduction if people want to be involved in machine learning projects, or sorry, generative AI projects, then get the lingo, know the parlance, get a certification. I'm assuming. I've not taken it, of course, because it's not available yet. But
I said exactly the same thing to a couple of colleagues the other day. It's the first time there's been another foundational exam, right? The cloud practitioner was built there for your salespeople, your execs, your CEOs, anybody that works with AWS in a business is very much asked to kind of take that exam to kind of get a better ecosystem. And I'm seeing comments. Hey, good evening in the comments. How are you doing? But it also says to me that AI is here to stay. AI is a career path at the end of the day. It's not just a fad anymore. AWS seem to be taking the stance from a training certification perspective. This is an opinion, not necessarily anything else. That AI is now just as important as being a solutions architect, a developer, or a sysadmin.
Yeah, I think that look, AI is definitely here to stay. Definitely, like there's no chance that it's going to go anywhere. And from here, we're still at the very beginning of this journey. And although that's overwhelming for a lot of people because it's like we're kind of over it, everybody's talking about it. I think if you've made it this far through into this live stream and you're still here, then you're probably interested in this conversation. But there are going to be some people who are like, do you know what? I can't talk about this anymore. So we have to all sort of march forward very carefully and with consideration. But this is going to stay. This isn't a flash in the pan. It's not going away. You look at the pure dollar investment that's been made by large organizations training vast models. This is staying. This is a big deal. Yeah. Can I mention something else? You were talking about certifications there for a minute. This isn't the first one. So I actually took this an NVIDIA certification the other day. By large organizations. That'll be me coming through. I took the NVIDIA Generative AI LLMs associate exam the other day, and that was quite an interesting thing as well. So it's I didn't do any preparation for it other than working in the industry, I suppose. But if you're interested in certification, I don't know. I never even considered taking an exam from NVIDIA before. But I took this one, and it was okay. It sort of eases you into the whole generative AI and specifically large language models, which of course is what most people are working with in this space.
This is interesting though as well, because like we see many different certifications come out from many different vendors, especially when it becomes a career choice, such as, I don't know, Kubernetes, Linux, Windowsy type technologies. This is huge. NVIDIA have got their own certification process, as does AWS now. And we have, is it machine learning.ai with
deep learning.ai?
Deep learning.ai, thank you. Is out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a certification with NVIDIA, deep learning.ai, friends of AWS, friends of me as well. So I've got a couple of courses that I've worked on up there, which I know you're fully aware of, and you were leading that in for me to say. So deep learning.ai, it's Andrew Ng, who is a luminary in the machine learning world. He did seminal pieces on machine learning really early in the game in the courses that he put together. If I can go to the website now if you want to have a look. So he actually has, this is his company, and he's got a couple of different types of courses on this, seeing as we're talking about courses and stuff. Now, these aren't certifications, they are courses. The website's changed recently, actually, but there are a couple of different things on here it's probably worth taking a look at from my humble perspective. So let's have a look for the well, that's one of them. So I could go there now. Let's open that up in a new tab so I don't get lost. This is almost like what we probably should be doing at the end of the stream, but why not? We're doing it now. This is serverless LLM applications with Amazon Bedrock. And this is a course that I put together. Look, it's me, and there's a cup of tea for you. So I put this course together along with Andrew at Deep Learning AI. Awesome experience. And this is a completely free course to be able to get hands-on with some generative AI technology in a serverless kind of way with this course. So that's pretty exciting. There's another course in here as well. I'll maybe pick it up later, but it's far more in depth, and that's really goes very deep into the whole concepts of large language models and the rest of it. But I feel like I've dived too deep and away from potentially what might have been your agenda. Sorry.
No, actually, do you know what? You're absolutely spot on. Serverless and Bedrock at the same time. Serverless and machine learning. They're my two passions right now. Serverless technologies and machine learning. Lots of love in the chat at the moment as well on LinkedIn for the new certification coming up as well. Thanks, ANR. Good morning, good evening. Simone, how you doing? Hey, Bryn. And Jason, thanks for joining us as well. But yes, definitely lots of love there for the new cert. Cool.
Awesome.
Now, with all this going on, though,
right,
this obviously says that AI is here to stay. We've just established that.
Yes.
So what are the use cases? At the end of the day, we have these conversations every day about what are the use cases in everyday life for Gen AI.
It's an important question as well, and an interesting question. So lots of people sort of, especially last year, were sort of playing around with generative AI and going, oh, look what I can do. I can make it do this fun thing. And oh, look what I can do. I can make it do this. Lots of notebooks, Jupyter notebooks being thrown around with lots of, interesting projects. That was fine. This year, really, it's about, well, where can we actually find the value? The business/social value, whatever it is. We need to actually start proving that this can actually deliver something other than just a sort of play toy kind of thing. So that's kind of where we are now. And I think if you look overall at the sort of generative AI landscape, especially from the perspective of a developer, a builder, a technologist like us, you can see it sort of in a couple of different ways. I mean, broadly speaking, if I think of architecture, software architecture, IT in general, we're connecting users with data. That's what we're doing, I think. I mean, you can probably try and find me some other places where that's not happening, but we're connecting a user with some data. They want to get access to it, and it's over here. What are we going to do? So normally what the day-to-day job of a software engineer or an architect who's putting these systems together is to figure out this component in the middle, this software piece in the middle, to be able to connect this user with some data. And you can put a form together or an application, whatever, and you can have some SQL code in there or whatever it is, because maybe the data is inside of a database and that kind of stuff. And so that's what that person does. And I think, so if we look at that perspective and think, well, where does generative AI live inside of that? And the first place that I think it fits and that is having significant impact right now, this is definitely delivering, is in the tooling that the developer is using in order to be able to create the code. So let's be blunt about this. Lots more code is being generated or being written now. And one of the reasons for that is because this generative AI tools are there to help people write code. For better or for worse, usually for better, sometimes for worse, it's helping these people write code, helping me write code. So a lot of people started last year, they would just go to ChatGPT and they would say, okay, I want a piece of code to do this. Remind me how to do this. You look at the stats for Stack Overflow, it just went through the floor, right? Because you didn't need to go there anymore, because that's how a lot of people would code. Stack Overflow over here, your ID over here, copy and paste code, right? That's what I did anyway.
Yep.
But now, using generative AI tools, you can be more specific about, well, I want a piece of code that actually does this, and this, I need to have this fitting into the actual code that I've already got. It's much quicker, it's much faster, it integrates with what you're actually doing. So awesome. Obviously, then as we progress through the year, we find that the tooling is now coming into the actual IDE that you're using itself. So if you're using Visual Studio Code or JetBrains or whatever to be able to write code, you can have a plugin in there, you've probably seen them, where it will sort of assist you and pair program or assist you in writing code as you're going, and it'd be contextually aware and super smart or relatively smart, and they're getting better and better all the time. So having that kind of coding assistant in there. Now it's powered by generative AI. I don't know that I care that it's powered by generative AI. It's a tool that's useful and I use it. I mean, if it was powered by, a team of monkeys sat in a warehouse somewhere with an internet connection, and if it still worked just as well, I would be very happy. In fact, maybe brings me more joy to think about this big warehouse full of monkeys. But it's a tool, we use it. And sometimes we sort of kind of forget in a way that it's just, it's powered by generative AI. But it is, and so that's one part. It's an existing productization of the technology, and we're using it significantly. But that's not necessarily the only place.
So I'm going to go into an example of that as well, because I think you're absolutely right, Mike. With we start off with this concept of Gen AI, just like we started off with the massive concept of the wheel. Now we take it for granted. I started off last November using a product which is formerly known as Code Whisperer. On the CLI, and in the months since that got released, I've come to rely on it. I've come to type and expect things to happen, expect it to, and it speeds up my productivity. I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of things that I do as fast as I do them without what it was called Code Whisperer, now Amazon Q Developer. And anyone that wants to get involved, Amazon Q Developer, there's the link. Absolutely fantastic product. Other code assistants do exist as well. But the point here is Gen AI is in the background helping us out. And sometimes we just forget that it's Gen AI, but it is Gen AI.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting what you said just then about like the fact that you've sort of gotten so used to it. That happened to me as well. I'll be completely and utterly honest. I think a lot of people in our industry, we have a certain aspect of us which is, I know what I'm doing. I don't need help. I know best. We all have a little bit of that. And so, I've installed Code Whisperer formerly and now Q on my machine. And I'm like, it gets in my way because I kind of felt that it did initially. And it took a little bit of practice to sort of figure out how it was going to work with me. Because look, I mean, if there was the smartest developer in the world stood right next to me and occasionally they reached over and typed in some things into my keyboard, I would probably think they're getting in my way too, even though they're way better and smarter than me. So it's about getting used to the idea that this might happen. And as you start to get used to it, it sort of vanishes into the background. And the thing happened for me actually with this. I play around with others. I play around with different plugins, some open source stuff, models running locally, super fun.
You're forgiven.
Well, look, tell you what, Olana, we should definitely talk about that. I mean, it's so powerful. And look, just because I work for AWS doesn't mean I want to try everything. And anyway, so I installed multiple of these things to the point where my IDE is going, I don't know what's going on right now, so I'm going to not have any of these things work, which is kind of fair enough, because if you've got multiple things trying to help you edit code at the same time, it's just not going to work out too well for you. Anyway, so they stopped working, and I noticed it. I really noticed it. It's like I'm writing some code out, and I realize now that I've come to expect it to finish my code for me. I come to expect it to write the next few lines of code for me, and I'm like, I wasn't expecting to do that myself. Come on. And then obviously I fixed it, and it's all fine now. But you definitely get used to it, and it makes a big difference, maybe more than you'd imagine. I'd say
it's like tripping on a stone when you just don't get that I've typed in what I want my function to be, and I've typed in the type, and I'm expecting the rest to come out, and all of a sudden, where is it? It's like
Yeah.
just stored your train of thought.
So I have some favorites here. Actually, can I show you my screen? I wasn't. This isn't
Oh,
a
of
thing I
course.
was planning to do. Yeah, not a thing I was planning to do. I tend to spend a lot more of my time on Amazon Bedrock. So if we probably have some time to talk about that and agentic workflows and things like that. Now, it doesn't, what this code currently, no, this is CloudFormation. Actually, it's a SAM template. If I go and have a look at some Python code here, for example, doesn't matter
SAM
what this does. We can have, what was that?
SAM represent.
SAM represent, yes. Well, I knew I was coming on the sounding board with the Alan Blockley of SAM fame. So I mean, I full kudos to you. I didn't really use SAM until you came on a live stream with me and showed me how to do it. So it's all your fault. But yeah, so this is some Python code. It doesn't really matter what it does here. But we can come and have a look at this a bit later on. But I have Q installed on this machine right here. And there's a couple of things I can do. So this is probably my favorite right here. And obviously, generative AI live coding, or live demos are always a bit fraught. Look at that. That's amazing. So what I was going to do is I was going to write here a print statement. And I don't know if it's just getting used to me, but this is almost exactly what I was going to do. But I actually don't want to do parameters. I want to have, I don't want the agent. I actually want to print the parameters out, say, for example. And I just found myself getting to this point where I could start to write the line. And these print statements would just come out because that's how I debug. It's not great, right? I get it, but this is what I want to do. And so it can just help you write this code so quickly. Say I want to, print the parameters out, then, let's see if it actually thinks, yeah, okay, what's this group? Yeah, it's probably not what I want, it's group. But I can say parameters and paste that in there. Whoops, I mispasted. So if I say parameters, let's see how we go. Can we get it from there? Yeah, there we go. And it completes the end of the thing for me. That kind of thing, it's addictive. Well, it's not. It sort of just fits in with what you do, and it's just always there. I genuinely would miss this if it wasn't there anymore. And then just the ability to be able to highlight code, for example. I can then go into Amazon Q here and say explain, and it'll bring up the chat. The number one top tip. I don't know if I've talked to you about this, Alan, but you notice how I actually have the Q chat on the right-hand side. Productivity.
You have mentioned this.
I will probably mention to you every time I do this, but definitely look at doing that.
And I took that top tip because I have one of those big wide 34-inch screens that go across the room.
Yeah.
And so normally I work in two halves, as we discussed earlier. So I normally have two halves of screen, code on one side, browse on the other. But I've actually gone full screen VS Code now, and I have Q on the right, and I've got code on the left with windows and stuff. So it makes it better spaced out, easy to see, easy to chat, easy to look at the code as well. That is a great top tip, by the way.
And for anybody who's like, what are you talking about? That just looks obvious. Sort of by default, this will appear over on the left-hand side, over the top of the file explorer. And so it's sort of a bit of a friction point because you often want to be browsing around these files, right? And you don't want to have to switch to and from the chat session. So just whack it on the right-hand side. There you go. Anyway, I wasn't planning on doing any of that, but I'm super psyched about this capability. I just right-clicked on there, for example, and ask it to explain that code for me. I need this. I don't work in large teams with lots of other people. I work with myself, and sometimes I need it to explain what did I do last month when I was developing this. Okay, yeah, cool, and it helps you out. Well, it's very cool.
But that's also another use case there, right there. And I'm just going to drop your screen for 2 seconds because.
Are you? It doesn't look like. There you go.
Well, get me my L plates, all right? Because exactly what you said there, right? What did you just write? Yeah. Where are you at? 3 months down the line, why did I write this? Okay, no one knows why you wrote it. What is it? And so I have been dabbling with Gen AI for other use cases. You've just gone down the road of exactly what we wanted to hear. There's a use case that in 6 months' time we will take for granted. It will just work.
Sure.
And it will help with productivity. It will help people learn. It will help people build. But then you've got to remember why. So another use case that I was thinking of was automatic documentation. What if I've written something? Okay, and I've got to do one of two things. One, I've got to come back to it later, understand what it is. I've done that many times, come back to my code and gone, why did you do this, Alan? But the other one was, I've just published a repo publicly, right? I've just pushed up some source code that I'm happy to share with everyone. And I'm like, how do I explain this? Do I spend hours and hours now documenting my code and making it in such a way that's readable to everyone else and making it so it feels like it's accurate? Or could I do it with AI? Could I do it with generative AI? Could I make some sort of automatic documentation writer for me? And so,
yeah.
Yeah.
Can I guess?
Go on, you can guess.
No, you can't. It's a terrible idea.
Incorrect.
Oh.
So I went down the route of quickly throwing together what I do. I start in the notebook. I don't like just going into code because code can take forever to dabble with. So I go to the notebook. And I ended up writing something which would be compatible with either running it from a command line. So I just give it some, command line code and where I wanted to put the code as well, the documentation as well. Put it into a format that's suitable for builders. Markup language is pretty accessible to a lot of builders, especially when you come to GitHub repos, and then create it in such a way that is understandable. And so I came up with something like this instead. I'm going to throw my screen up. So this is the function that I wrote. It's in notebook format right now. So just to break it up to make it more readable. Now, this is the code that I originally wrote. This is actually live code from a product that I've recently a thing that I've recently wrote called Region Compare. We'll talk about that on another day, but ultimately it's something that you can compare services and regions with. But the code got a bit overwhelming, especially when you want to come back to it later. I have not read this code. You can see there's a lot in there. There's a lot of repetition sometimes, but there's a lot of Python functions in there and date stamps and stuff.
Yeah. Keep scrolling.
So I wanted to document something. I wanted to document it. And so that's where I came up with this particular script. So it came together over time. But ultimately, the key thing here is I've used Bedrock. I've decided to use my favorite model, Claude 3 Haiku. And I've asked Claude 3 Haiku to ultimately go and create the documentation. Now, I've made my prompt a bit, I've created a system prompt here. We'll talk about prompting very shortly, I think. But I've told Claude what I want to do. It's a technical writer that's going to do something. Okay. And the overarching, and then I've called the new Converse API. So Converse API takes over, is the new way of calling Bedrock with this particular prompt here. Okay. And all the gumph that goes with it as well. And the key point here is not the technology. It's not the code behind it. Yes, it's quite complex in some cases, but simplistic in other. But what I've done here is you can see that I've told it to call my test source file as a variable. And I'm just going to run the whole lot.
Okay. So Amazon Bedrock. So you mentioned Bedrock for a couple of times. So I guess that can I chip in while it's running? Is that okay?
Please do. It's going to take a few seconds.
Right. Okay. Cool. So we talked about the idea that you can use applications and tools to be able to make your application development faster and more efficient. Amazon Bedrock is foundation models that you can connect in with an API to do the other part of where we had our users over here, we had our data over here, and we had this software application stack in the middle. We made it more efficient to write it with those tools. But what about using generative AI inside of the thing you're writing And if you're doing that, you can use these large foundation models, generative AI models, to do all kinds of things. And I think the thing that's really exciting for me is that it can take non-deterministic inputs, such as like just some source code, or even just it could be something else in this particular case, and it can then provide non-deterministic outputs, and you can control and you weave where you want that to go through the prompt. And so it's incredibly powerful, that you can actually build it into your own application. And we could talk more about some of those architectures as well. But it unlocks your application to be able to talk to way more data than it could before. Ultimately, it unlocks the user to be able to connect to way more data than before. Whereas in the past, they could get to the data that was in the SQL database, but then unstructured data was more of a challenge. But now, with the language understanding, the large language model can help the application unlock the value in loads of other data sources. So image data, video data, but mostly textual data that's otherwise unstructured. You can now go and grab value from that with a large language model powered application. Has your code finished running?
It has, yes. And that's why I invite Mike to these sort of things, because he explains them much better than I do. So what we've done is we've asked Claude to effectively go and look at the code and then create some documentation from it. And it's created me an output here. It's done something that I think is relevant. So it's told me what it's thought about it. We'll talk about prompt engineering very shortly, about why I do this. But ultimately, it's given me what it thinks the steps are, and then it's created an actual piece of documentation. It's created a markup heading, an overview of the document, and so on. But also, if I've done this right, I should have outputted it. There we go. I've outputted it appropriately this time. Yeah. So it's explained, it's documented the environment variables, and then it writes it out to app.md. App.md should be somewhere here. And knowing what I know about VS Code, I should be able to preview.
Yeah,
the
I think there's a button over on the right-hand side underneath the QR code. But yeah, cool.
Yep. So it's created some nice documentation here in a nice format that's readable. And I can come back to this later and understand what it did. So from the perspective of a developer, we've just improved time efficiency. We've improved consistency, because if my prompting is correct, then it'll always create the same level of documentation to be read by the type of person we've asked it, the type of audience that we've asked it to write towards as well. And then accuracy as well, because it'll look through the code and it'll be more accurate in what does this function do as well.
Yeah, should be. It's definitely worth checking to make sure it got it right for the first couple of times. But yes, I think so. I like the consistency is right. And so what you've gone and done is you've developed your own tool to sort of, I talked about how you've got the tooling that sits inside of Visual Studio Code, for example, to sort of pair codes along with you, like Q, like we just saw. You've got the other end of the spectrum where you've got pure play connecting users with data. And then you've come and developed your own thing in the middle. It bridges the two things together so well. So you're using the foundation models and your own prompt engineering to get the outcome you wanted, which in this case was to do with software development. So it's a nice, real central piece.
Yeah, and software development, in the software development lifecycle, you've got pipelines, and you could throw this little tool into the pipeline to automatically generate that for any code, whether it be HTML, Python, C. Because the model is so broad, it would be able to translate that for any particular model. I've not tuned mine for Python. It's just I've asked it.
Yeah, well, because these things are made by technologists, and then we are technologists using it, they are typically quite good at code. I am seeing this more and more with the foundation models from different providers that are being launched. And one of the bullet points is really good at code, because they're obviously trying to entice us in to use them. So yeah. These things know code already. I mean, how long did it take you to train that model to write that application that you just did?
There was training involved.
Exactly. There was no training involved. That's my point. Yeah. No time at all.
And it took me about 10 minutes to write the code with Amazon Q.
Yeah. Well, there you
So
go.
the idea, the inspiration is what it takes to spark. And then with the relevant tooling available, it makes it so much easier. Now, moving on to
Yes.
another use case, because
Hmm.
that's coding, that's all technology. Yeah, okay, yeah, Gen AI is great in the codey world, in the technologist world, but how's it going to be used in the real world? It's
In
a
the code,
great.
yes. Writing code is my real one, but I understand what you mean. Yes. So you mean like how do you put it inside of a product, I suppose? How do you do that?
That's right. How do we remove it from the matrix? So I had this other idea, and this was quite early in the piece when Claude 3 was released by Anthropic. Thank you, friends at Anthropic, for releasing Claude 3, because it really opened my eyes towards a new feature, vision to text.
Yes.
When that feature was announced for Claude 3, I was like, I need to investigate this. I need to understand what it does. And so I had a bit of inspiration from a hackathon October previously, where Claude wasn't available. Bedrock had only just been released, so it wasn't available to us to use. And a museum was saying, how do we translate art to text? How do we catalog these images? So I came up with this idea. The idea was, I want to throw pictures at NS3 bucket, and I want Claude to tell me what they are.
Yep.
And so I'm not going to go through the code right now because the code will take too long to go through, but I ended up with this. This is live right now. Ultimately, the bucket is not public. But if I throw a picture into the bucket, it will translate it to give me a summary of the picture. And I realize it's very, very small for people, so I'm going to zoom in.
It's a little small, yeah, but okay.
That's it.
Gotcha.
Sorry, I want to make sure you don't need your second pair of glasses there, Mike.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. I can zoom in with my own head. So I'm seeing a table of data, and I can see what an ID, a category, and a summary, and then the actual image itself. So presumably you've got some code which generated the category and the summary. Is that what's happening here?
Exactly, and the ID as well. So the ID is also self-generated as well. But what I've asked Claude to do is to look at the image. The image on the right-hand side is unmodified, apart from now, maybe. But I've given it images of varying types. So it's not like I've given it one type of image, or lots of scenery, or lots of architecture diagrams, or photos. I've given it varying images, and what it's done for me, based upon my prompting again, is it's given it a category: nature, concepts. Is probably where it puts things that it doesn't understand. Technology, backgrounds, entertainment, back to technology again, right there. Travel, and so on. But it's accurately describing the image as well. And in some cases, it's able to identify the piece of scenery. It can see if it's in its model. So, for example, here we've got the Twin Towers over at Kuala Lumpur.
Yep.
We've also got, for example, a person wearing a green jacket. Now, that was quite abstract from mine, and I can click on this and show the image. This one felt quite abstract to look at because of the colors and how they blend in, etc. But if we go back, it's managed to work out that it is a person wearing a green jacket.
And it's categorized it as technology, I guess, because the person is using, and it's obviously about the person using the technology, I think.
Yes, I believe so. Now, I wanted this to be a fair test, so the file name hasn't put any bias into this. I've actually, all the files that go in, they get renamed first, and they get passed into another bucket. So I've removed any bias on file names as well. This one was totally random. This is a picture that my son made as a logo for his stream, and obviously it's come back with something quite
described it.
So it's done something again with something that's not necessarily public. So
I'm glad you specified where some of the images come from, because you originally said it was something to do with the museum, and I was like, this is an interesting museum. They have a very interesting collection of pictures. But I think this is just these are samples, right? I get it.
These are samples, right? This is samples for me to say, what can you do?
Yes.
But why is this important? So again, if I was running, say, an art studio or a marketing studio, and I've got lots of stock images, categorizing these can be a pain. I know. I've heard complaints from people in marketing say images everywhere and I don't know what's what. So be able to categorize them into different categories and explain what they are. And maybe future state of this particular app is to put a search engine behind it in like a vector database or something, or even just a string database. Great, I can then search with using normal words for a picture that's going to give me a green pill that says good.
Yes.
You know,
and
or an
so,
architecture.
yeah. And so some people might be thinking about vector embeddings and about how that works, and the fact that there are multimodal vector embeddings. But what this is doing is describing this specific image so that you'd then be able to find this specific image. So you might be able to use like semantic search with text or images to then go and find images that are like another image. But with what you've got here, you can find the specific image that you've got in this database. It's very challenging when this multimodal stuff happens, when you've got different modalities, so text and image on the input, and then text on the output, and then you've got images on the output. And yeah, it gets a bit confusing at times. But this, it makes sense to me anyway. So you're using Haiku here, Haiku or Sonnet?
Haiku. Yeah,
So this is
yep.
The Claude 3 model, and in order to be able to create text generations, you can add in a prompt, and that prompt can have either text or an image or both going in, which I guess is what you've done. So did you have presumably you would have had to have had a system prompt or a prompt that you passed in along with the image so that you had some consistency in the output?
Yes, correct. So I've given it a system prompt to start with to make it more consistent, and then I've given it a user prompt of just the image. So the system prompt is telling it what its role is, and then the actual prompt is the image. So it knows that your role is purely to catalog images only.
Interesting. Okay. And so the output, did you ask it for a JSON output or some kind of output that you could pass?
Yeah, I asked it for structured output. So in the end, the data was a JSON output that gave me the category, the summary, and its ID. And then there's actually a DynamoDB table in the background that it gets stored in. So ultimately, we're not using data with GenAI. We're creating data.
Gotcha. Exactly. Yeah. No, love it. Love it.
And look, at the end of the day, this particular use case here does go a lot further. And I mentioned museums earlier. And this was a real world use case that shed inspiration for this. Making art more accessible for the vision impaired. So when they go to a museum, how do we make it more inclusive? It's a piece of artwork, but you can't quite see it or the details, etc. So this technology could make art more audio. Because once you've got that expression in text, you could then push it out to some sort of audio format instead as well. And so that becomes a really powerful use case. And also, we've then increased the efficiency as well of cataloging that particular piece of art for that particular use case. It's more scalable and it's more consistent again. And we've just really made a really powerful use case for vision to text in GenAI. And eventually, it's one of those use cases which, again, how it works would get taken for granted. But the people that are impacted will still appreciate it.
For sure. For sure. Awesome.
But prompt engineering. Let's drop my screen a second. Where's the mouse gone? This is what happens when you're the producer and the presenter.
Yes. You need a production team. Yes.
Yes, I'm here and here. So prompt engineering.
Yeah.
I went through a few things there earlier with prompt engineering, but can you give us some key tips around how to get the most out of your prompt? Because a lot of people start with, show me, what's the capital of Australia? And that's it.
That's what I start with. Yeah.
So how do we get the most out of a prompt, especially in more complicated use cases?
Yeah. Okay. Wow, there's lots to this, and I think we'll probably only bounce along the surface of it even now. And there's probably going to be some things that are discovered over the next, tomorrow, that will actually change the way this works as well. But there are definitely some things that we can look at. So yeah, I'm on the Amazon Bedrock console page inside of AWS. The reason why I'm here is because it's my job. No, the reason why I'm here is because if you go over to the left-hand side, we can go into a huge amount of detail about how to actually run with this, but I just want to go into the playgrounds here. So we've got the chat, text, and image playgrounds. So if I go into the text playground, this is about as simple as it gets when it comes to playing around with models. So let me come and choose a model to play around with. I'm going to choose Mistral Large, I think. Actually, I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but anyway, we'll do that. And what we can do is we can come in here and we can say, what is the capital city of Australia? Because that's what you said, Australia.
Not Austria.
Not Austria, although that would be fine too. Press run and we get some generation coming up. And so it tells us about that. And it tells us a lot more besides. So here's the interesting thing. The text playgrounds, the playgrounds in general inside of Amazon Bedrock, it's really the beginning of your developer journey, right? So how do you choose the model that you want to use? You can do it in here. How do you start to play around with the prompt that you want to use? You can do that in here as well. Now, this is quite frankly ridiculous, right? I mean, like I asked it, what's the capital city of Australia? And it went and wrote an entire essay. So what do we want to do? So yes, we could talk about all these techniques that we can use to get them to think more deeply about stuff. But maybe we will also want to just add in some extra information about the kind of answer we want. So we could say, in this particular case, it's a very simple question. So let me just get rid of all of that. Let's see if we can neaten this up again. We could just say, write the city name in the answer. Let's see if that actually works. I mean, live coding, if you've had a go at live coding and always been nervous about your code not working, try generative AI. Anyway, let's see what happens. Right. Okay. So we just get the answer out. So there's prompt engineering done. Okay. I mean, like it's about writing something more specific in your prompt, which is going to guide the output generation to be just what you want. Now, there's more to it than just that. Let's dismiss my notification down the bottom. There's more to it than just that, right? So you can also do things like adjusting the length of the output. So this maximum length here was set to as high as it can possibly go. That's another reason why we ended up having a really, really long generation. Not because that maximum length influences what's generated, but it just meant that it had the scope to keep going on and on and on. So that's just something to bear in mind as well. So yeah. Now, in this particular case, the question that we're asking is super simple. And it's the kind of thing that the model probably has a fairly good handle on already. What's the capital city of Australia? But there are other things that you can do, such as the kinds of things that you were showing in the prompts and stuff that you were looking at in your solution just a moment ago. So you might want to do something slightly more complicated. Now, I don't know how much more complicated I can get in this whilst I'm live typing here. But let's get rid of some of these things again, give us a bit more space. So there are some techniques. Let me switch over to the Anthropic models for a moment. And I'm going to choose, well, let's go to Haiku. Just because we can use different models. And we could ask it a more sophisticated question. I don't know. Well, let's ask it, what is the best way to make a cup of tea? So, okay, again, simple-ish question, but it could now do the same thing and spew a lot of data out. So let's be more specific about it. So if I just do a couple of enters in here, first, let's say first, think, let's say plan out how you will answer the question and place your thinking between, and then we say thinking, XML tags, which I imagine is something similar to what you said in the prompt you were just looking at before. or the prompt that you did. Now, a couple of things about this. First of all, they're not really XML tags, are they? Because it's in the middle of some free-flowing text and stuff, and what's going to be inside of the tags is just free-flowing text as well. They're really just placeholders. Also, the fact that we've got thinking in capital letters, that also doesn't really matter. It could say foobar, that would be fine. But the model's probably been fine-tuned to understand this. So whilst it probably could work in a different way, we may as well use the thinking tags here.
And just to interject there, Mike, as well, using that as well could be outputted to some sort of audit file, log file, so that you understand what the model's doing and to then go and debug it later, maybe. And so you know how to modify things later.
So yes. Well, so the other thing, though, is that what we're doing here, I've not finished the prompt yet, right? So this is important. So I need to write some more stuff because at the moment, all it's being encouraged to do is to do some thinking. What I might then say is then write the steps needed between, and I'm going to say output XML tags. So a couple of things have happened here. We've got this space to think, and then we've got our a definition of where we want the output to be. Now, earlier on in the usage of large language models, you could ask them questions and you would basically want just the answer. So typical one here is if you want the output in a JSON format or something, and you say, give me the output in a JSON format. And then the very next thing it does is say, yeah, no worries. I'll give you all the stuff you need in a JSON format, and then write some JSON format, some JSON code. Now, the problem with that is that if you're passing the whole generation into your code, then you've got all this guff at the beginning, which is just it being friendly, that you want to get rid of. So actually being specific about where is the output going to be, put it between these tags, then you can easily get some regex, you can pass it out, and you can just get the output you want. In fact, let's do that. So write the steps needed in using JSON format. Why not? Just to prove the point. Format between the output tags. Now the whole idea around thinking is sort of like the special bit here. Now, if you don't ask the model to think, then it won't, basically. And so if what you're asking is something which is a little bit complex and requires it to actually reason and to plan, then giving it some space to think is really powerful. And the only way that a large language model can think is by getting it to generate tokens. In other words, to write something into the output. So here we've specifically asked it to basically break. I mean, it's not a particularly complex one. And if we had a much more complex problem, then it would be more useful. But we've specifically asking it to sort of take a moment, think about what you want to do, and then write it. Whereas if we'd gotten rid of that, this model is very capable. It might have done it okay, but we're just throwing it straight into generate JSON tokens or generate tokens that create a JSON structure. That's inherently a more difficult thing to do. So let's stop talking and let's press run on that and see what it actually does, and hopefully it'll do it. And yeah, now I didn't give it a specification for how I wanted the JSON output to be, so what it's done is absolutely fine. But you'll see what it's done here is like, okay, I'm going to think about this to answer this question. I will, and it's then just listed out step by step what is required in order to answer this question, even though this is fairly straightforward. And then we have our output, and we've got all of the output data there. And so with our code that was calling this, we could just get a regex expression. We could just strip all of this out, and we'd have just the JSON structure that we want. So there's just a couple of ideas about what you can do. Give it space to think, and then specifically tell it where you want the output to be. There's an idea. Now, one extra thing that I'll say is if you're looking to work with your data. So at the moment, we're just working with a prompt here. We've just typed in a prompt. We've got it to output something. Now, becoming more and more common. And of course, what you would have done with your documentation project before, and actually, I guess what you'd have done with the image one to some extent as well, is that you actually want to include some of your own data. And so in this particular case, I struggle to see exactly how we could say, what kind of tea? We haven't said what kind of tea. So the user will enter the type of tea to plan for between the input, and apparently it's a good idea to actually show opening and closing XML tags. There we go. So now, okay, so I now need to put more stuff in, but I've defined that there's going to be some input from the user. And so I can put down here in fact, I can just copy and paste them. You do need to watch out when you're doing your regex with this, that you look for the second pair, or you're only looking at the tokens which have been generated. So I don't know, let's type in green tea. Now, what's happened here? Why is this interesting? Well, we're including some information which has come from the user into this prompt, which is now becoming a prompt template. And what we've done is we've put it into a section of the template between these input tags, and we've told it that the information between these input tags is input from the user. That's useful because it's one step in the right direction of making sure that if there's anything written here in between these input tags which is trying to jailbreak the model, then it's got a way of trying to prevent that. Now, it's not totally robust, but it's a step in the right direction. So the model reading this back will understand that green tea is sort of kind of untrusted and it's come from the end user. So let's press run on that again. Oh, I don't know if I cleared out the previous one. And yeah, now hopefully it's telling us how to make green tea. So there's a couple of things. And this inclusion of data from the outside world, if you like, is called in-context learning. And it's really the foundation of prompting, prompt engineering, and all of the more sophisticated architectures that you have when it's got, which is to do with generative AI. So all of the things that we've looked at use this to some extent.
So I've got a question with that, because you just added an input, which is an outside context. Great, not a problem. But what if you have an environmental context?
Environmental context, such as?
I don't know, say that you were, instead of making tea, what am I going to wear today? And right. I don't know, what you're going to wear would depend on whether it's winter in Brisbane or summer in Cairns or whatever.
Gotcha.
Yes. So how would you address those environmental inputs?
So when you say environmental, you mean specifically the environment, but yeah, yes. I think I'd be saying, how do we get this application to reach into the outside world and be able to grab some information externally? And so, yeah, if I've got some time, I'm more than happy to show you agentic workflows.
You have a little bit of time if you want to bet at that time.
Okay. So it's great. Look, so I have here, this is my attempt at some way of being able to draw a quick diagram. Now, look, I don't have a pen, I'm afraid, for whatever reason. I'm drawing with the mouse. But okay, this is what that's going to look like. So we have an application here. And again, I'm drawing and then writing with a mouse. And we have our user over here, and they're going to be making such a request into our application. And you're very kind, like what to wear, for example, because I actually do have a demonstration which shows that. So let's say we ask that our application, what should I wear today? And now there's various, as you say, external factors that can help with this. One thing you could do as a user is say, this is the weather today, and detail out what the weather is, and then say, and what should I wear? And maybe any other information that you might have as well. Press go, and you're in a normal chat session with a normal large language model powered application. Nothing required there. But in this particular case, we want to be a little bit more friendly and helpful. So we ask the app something along the lines of, what should I wear today? And the application will use the power of large language models to help it answer the question. So we connect to, we connect to our application a large language model. It's by far the easiest way to do it is just via an API call out to a massive foundation model that you didn't have to train. It's that is essentially Amazon Bedrock. In fact, I think I've got an Amazon Bedrock logo. There we go. So your application can reach out, and let's say that could be a Lambda function, couldn't it? Yay. So now we've sent our natural language in, and the application uses the large language model to figure out what to do next. Now, what we've said is we want to be able to reach out into the outside world. So what we need is a series of tools to allow us to do that. So I'm going to draw these tools out on the side here. Here's a tool. I'm going to draw several tools. In fact, I'm going to draw 3 because that's what I've decided to do. And these tools can reach out to things such as an API. Maybe the tool can itself calculate something. So large language models typically aren't very good at doing any kind of specifically correct mathematics. So you could use the tool for doing this. So I'm going to say that that's sort of recursively doing some stuff. This one, I don't know, where can this go? Well, this could go to AWS. There are other AWS services. Essentially, it's the same as an API. It could reach out and do stuff. So we can connect these things together. So let's do that. And now we've got an application that can connect to APIs. Okay, what's so special about that? Not much. But what happens is when we send our request in this natural language format, the application will then wrap that request up in a prompt template and send it to the LLM. And included in that prompt template is a list of all the tools that are available. And so the response that comes back from the large language model won't be, in this particular case, what outfit to wear. It will be, okay, I need more information. And so it's got a choice. It's actually got 4 places where it could get more information from. So it knows about the 3 different tools it's got. So it could come back here and say, hey, application, in order to be able to figure this out, I need to know the location of the user. They've supplied this place name. I need to convert this to a latitude and longitude because that's what I need to send to the weather API in a moment. So it could send that information back. The application could go and use that API. The API would then, or the tool which uses the API, the data then flows back in textual form and then is sent back to the large language model. So let's draw some more arrows on here because we get a lot. So it can, so that's come back with what tool to use. We've gone back to the large language model and said, here is that data you asked for. And then the large language model, contextually aware in a conversation that it's in with itself, there's only one request happened here. But that large language model could then instruct the API to, well, with this information, go and call this tool and go and get some information and then get the response back from there. And then the application sends that back to the large language model again. And it can say, right, excellent, I've got everything I need to know. I've got the answer, sends the answer back in text, which then gets sent back to the user. So from this single command, single query coming in, the application, which is empowered by the large language model and all these tools, can go and think, plan, like we saw before with the thinking and the planning, and then reason through and then perform a set of actions and basically define its own workflow on the fly to do this fairly mundane task of figuring out this information. Now, I said before, there were 4 places that the large language model could request information from. And hopefully you've sort of thought ahead what that might be. But it's we've got 3 tools down the side, but you could also come back to the user and say, hey, can you give me some more information here? There's something I don't know. So for example, if this knows that in order to figure out the weather, it needs to know where you are. So if I say, hey, what should I wear today? The first thing it might do is come back to me and say, well, where are you? If it doesn't know, because it's not in a GPS app or anything like that. So it would just ask you. So this is the agentic workflow. This is something which we're using the large language model for its ability to be able to understand natural language, super powerful. But through its ability to understand natural language, it can plan a series of steps that it can take, of tasks that it can perform, of actions that it can perform, and in context, in construct, in collaboration with the application, it can actually then reach out to the outside world and get live data. Because just to be completely clear about it, A large language model is a point-in-time set of data. It doesn't know what time it is. It doesn't know what the weather is. It doesn't know very much of that. It doesn't know any of that kind of data at all. It's just got sort of world knowledge. It knows how to do things. And so that's the architecture of an agentic workflow. And all of this happening with these strings flying backwards and forwards, they all going into a prompt and a prompt template, just like we saw when we were inside of the Bedrock console just a moment ago. So how on earth would we build this, especially if they're all Lambda functions? But is that the kind of thing you had in mind there, Alan? There we go.
Very much so. Yes, Lambda, serverless, bit of Bedrock. But
yes,
the impact of agents then is making Gen AI more native to our real to our lives.
Well, so there's a couple of things happening here. So it's the application being able to connect in to a non-deterministic data source, and that is both the prompt that comes in, but also potentially the data that's coming back. It's dealing with things that are not necessarily set in stone. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is its ability to actually be able to, its intelligence. So it is intelligent. It's not alive and it's not conscious, but it is intelligent. It's the second letter of artificial intelligence. It's intelligent, and it's using that intelligence to be able to plan out, at the moment, mundane tasks, such as, okay, you've asked me to do this thing, right? How can I orchestrate my life with the tools that I have available to me to get this done, so that I don't have to come back and ask you. I don't have to come back and ask the user. I don't have to get the application developer to write a huge amount of code to do something which is ultimately, from a human perspective, fairly simple to do. So yeah, there's a lot going on here. And it's super exciting. Now, if you've used things like, or if you've heard of things like LangChain, so LangChain, open source project, massive open source project, very, very active last year. And that was the kind of thing, that is the kind of thing that LangChain can help you do. Connect together large language models with tools and data sources and what have you, to be able to put together flows like this. I have another way you can do it as well that I'd like to show you, which is inside of Bedrock. So I can do that.
Just where you load that. Yes, happy to watch that. Question in the chat from Millard saying, it's very interesting, Mike. Is this multi-agent concept? And it'd be great if you could share a link for further reading.
Yeah, okay. So multi-agent was the particular thing which I latched onto when you said that. So this is something which is getting a lot more attention of late. And so things like open source project crew.ai allows you to be able to have multiple different agents that sort of work with each other. For now, and that's really interesting. And I think that there's a lot to be done in that space. And I think there's a lot of experimentation that we can do there. For now, if we're looking to sort of go beyond LangChain and into a production environment, then my suggestion would be just bite off a little bit, just get a single agent to work on something, because a single agent can still do multi-step workflows that it decides on the fly, and it can still be extremely powerful. So there are definitely ways that you can throw multiple agents in together, but unless you've already started working with agents, I would start with one, and before you end up adding another one. That's my take on it. In terms of documentation and links, then, well, let me show you what I've got here. And probably the thing I'd probably send you to is the community.aws link that I shared with you prior, Alan, and potentially some of the source code stuff that we've got as well. But the project which I'm about to show you, I've actually got a GitHub repository for this. So you could go and take a look at that as well, if you like. So this is sort of the code version, a real running version of what we were just talking about, with the ability to be able to do that. What you're going to wear. This is why I was talking about what are you going to wear today? It's a weird question to ask otherwise, but we've actually got a version of this actually running. So inside of Amazon Bedrock, just really, really quickly, if you go down, if you've never been here before, scroll all the way down on the left-hand side to model access and enable access to models that you want to use. In this particular case, I'm going to be using Claude 3 Haiku because, as we've talked about, it's one of the favorites. It's fast and it's an intelligent model. So I'm going to come down to agents on the left-hand side here and show you this. So I've created this outfit assistant agent. I just need to collapse a few things down because I'm quite zoomed in here, and I'll need to do that a few times as we go through. So this is how to create an agentic workflow. You can create this inside of the AWS console. Great. You can also do it with CloudFormation so that if you're coming to do a production deployment, so it's all there. And this was actually deployed with SAM, as I talked about a little earlier today. So
SAM represent.
SAM represent. So yeah, so it's in here. Now, so if I take a quick look at this, the best thing to do is click on Edit in Agent Builder, and we can see a little bit more of this information. So normal kinds of things. We have the name, we have a description, which I've actually used this time. And I point that out for a reason, because in a moment, there are descriptions that really matter. This is just for us. And we've got the normal kind of role stuff that you might expect to see in this kind of thing. And then we've got this model selection. So I get to choose which model I want to use in under the hood with my workflow. Is my diagram still there? Yes, it is. It's this large language model. We're choosing which one we want to use. So in this case, I'm using Claude 3 Haiku. You can select from a number of different ones. This list will grow. So keep checking back. Then we have this instructions for the agent. This is not a just some text for us. This is actually text that we're passing to the agent to explain how we want it to work. And I was actually playing around with this. It's actually quite extensive. I was playing around with this just before we came on air. And another prompt engineering tip that I have for you is if you're not sure what the best way is to actually write the prompt or system prompt like this, tell Claude, be honest. So I'm writing this for Claude 3 Haiku. So I went to Claude 3 Sonnet and I said in the text playground, this is what I want. And this is my draft system prompt. These are the things I'm concerned about making sure will work. Can you redraft this? And actually using the model to write the prompt. So meta prompting of a sort. We're going to see a lot more of this kind of thing over the next 12 months or so. Anyway, this is a very simple version of that where I'm just asking it, what would you do? So that's the system prompt. And then we have these things called action groups. Well, I've got one action group here, and this is the tooling. So back to the diagram again. This represents these tools here. So these tools in my account right now are Lambda functions in order to make this connection here. Because agent code essentially lives in here somewhere. But to make this connection, we need to tell the system about it. So we do that through this action group. So if I click on action groups, to collapse that down again, we've got a name, a description, which is very much for us. And we've got a couple of different ways of creating these. I'm just going to focus on one for this session because I don't want to go too long over time because that's what I do. I talk a lot. But we're basically connecting up these tools with Lambda functions. So that's the option we've got selected here. If you're coming in and doing this fresh for the first time and you're doing it in the console, you can select this option above and it will create a stub Lambda function and all of the necessary permissions that you need. And then the next time you come in, the radio button will be down here, which is you have a Lambda function deployed. And so that's essentially the stage where I'm at. So we've got that, and it connects up to a Lambda function. We'll go and have a look at that in a moment. And then we define what the different tools are. So this very much is each of these tools, the definition of each of these. And so we have one called get coordinates, and we have a description here. And this description is used again inside of the prompt. So the large language model will read this. And so typos aside, it's kind of important. So get coordinates. This will retrieve the latitude and longitude for a given place name. That could be useful. Now, when I'm putting these things together, I like to be a little vague because I want to see how hard I can push the agent. If you were doing this in production, you might put a lot more of a description in there, but that's what I'm doing. And so then we have this parameter of place name. So we have a function called get coordinates. We know what it does, and a parameter that we pass in is a place name. We're going to expect to get back from that a latitude and longitude. We have get current time. Yes, large language models don't know what time it is. Why would they? They don't. And so if you want the large language model to be time aware, you need to tell it. or you need to give it a tool so that it can go and find out for itself. So that's what this does. And it gets a current time for a specific latitude and longitude, because time zones, aren't they fun? So that's what that does. And in this case, you pass in latitude and longitude. And then we have get current weather. Gets the current weather for a specific latitude and longitude. You can guess a lot of this lat long stuff going on, including basically what you're going to get out of it. And again, you pass in a latitude and longitude. So that's now described to the agent what those tools are. So just really quickly, if I scroll back up, I can click onto the Lambda function, and then we'll actually have a go with it. But we have a look at the Lambda function. Hopefully it does actually open up in the console, because I did deploy it with Sam, but I think it's small enough that it'll show here. Yes, it does. I could also show you in Visual Studio Code, of course. Hopefully you can see that. Is that big enough? Yeah, it's a little bit squishy if I go too big. All right. Oh, look, all of that verbose text. Who do you think wrote that? Not me. Okay. So this is the Lambda function. So basically, if you're familiar with Lambda, then you get this event when the Lambda function gets called. And inside of the event, you get all of the reason why the Lambda function was called. And so the things that we're interested in getting back is the function name. So what function is it that you were looking to call? So the action group goes to one Lambda function, by the way. Maybe I should have mentioned that. And so all three of those tools are all triggered from this Lambda function. And if you look at the top somewhere, I'm including the three tools as the classes that are deployed by the side of this Lambda function. Please say that makes sense. So we have the coordinate finder.
It makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm just taking in the function name, which is going to be called, which is one of those functions that we just had defined. And then we're going to create a text response by calling this handle request. And handle request will take in the function and the parameters. So that might be the latitude, longitude, it might be the place name. And so obviously handle request is a function down here rather, which is going to say, okay, well, if it's get coordinates, go and call get coordinates, pass the stuff in. If it's current time, then go and get the time, passing in the lat and long. If it's get weather, then get the weather with the lat long. And if you look into those functions, that's where the business logic is for, whatever. So the get weather goes and uses an API. The get current time just uses a Python library, which I found, which does it. Get coordinates, that uses the location service, the AWS location service, to take the place name and convert it into lat long. So I've all of that exists in code elsewhere. If you're interested, I can show you, but that's not really the point of what I'm showing you. So it goes and gets that response body and basically just passes that back. All that code does there is passes that information back to the agent so that it can, or the agent calling code, so it can decide what it's going to do next. So
yep.
Yeah.
Let's see the connection.
Let's see it go.
We're all excited to see what this is going to do.
Oh, hopefully it's going to work. Now, so we're going to come in here. I'm going to click prepare, and I'm going to click test. And what that's going to do is that's just going to get this chatbot ready at the side for us to be able to have a go with. So all of this, of course, you can consume via an API, and so you can build it into your own application. But this is just a little test area. So let's start off with something not very helpful, potentially. I'm just going to say hello. And it says, okay. And so it's happy to have a conversation with me. And this is a lot to do with the way that initial system prompt was. Without that initial system prompt, it can actually be quite curt. But now it's like, hey there, fashion friend, I'm Claude, your personal style guru. How can I help you put together a fab outfit today? Just let me know where you're headed and I'll work on my weather checking magic. So I asked it to be kind of informal.
He's got a lot of flair, isn't he?
They, he, she, it,
sorry, yes.
Yeah. Yes, they have a lot of flair. So, but they have asked me a question, where are you headed today? So let's say I'm going to, where am I going? Let's say I'm just going to Brisbane, down the road. I could be more verbose by this. Let's be, hey, I am headed into Brisbane for an awesome time. I'm just making it so that it actually has to work a little bit. If I passed that string to the location service, it probably wouldn't work. So it should understand that it needs to pick out the place name. So it goes away and it figures it out. So let's see what it comes back with. And it should come back now with an outfit recommendation, because that's what we've asked for. The user at the end of the day doesn't care how it managed to do that. We do.
I mean,
but yeah.
So
it's
from
come back.
personal experience, sorry.
Yeah,
From personal experience, it's been quite cold in Brisbane today. So
right, sure,
let's see if it agrees with us.
Yeah, with the current weather in Brisbane being a mild 13 degrees with a high of 15 degrees and some clouds, I'd recommend blah, 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 blah. And it's got this bullet pointed listing of all of these things I can do with some ankle boots and a light jacket and blah, 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 blah. Have an amazing time. So it's come back with a lot of information there. So hopefully this is correct. Happy for it to be challenged. Let's have a look at what happened. So if I click show trace, because we are here in the debug session, essentially, we can actually have a look behind the scenes about what happened. There were 3 different steps happened in order to get that. So I just asked one question. Ignore the fact that I said hello. That didn't really matter. I just asked one question, essentially. It did 3 things. So let's have a look. Let's expand this open. If we scroll down here, well, we get to see behind the scenes. We see the system prompt, which is the thing that we wrote, which actually is really quite long. And in here somewhere, we'll end up with some examples that the service actually include about you're an agent. So this is essentially the kind of thing you need to do. You can edit all of this prompt template, by the way, and that's probably important to do in a production system. You want to really refine it down to your particular use case. Then we have, okay, here are the tools you've got. You've got get coordinates, retrieves the latitude, longitude, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff that we looked at. It's all here inside the prompt. Let's scroll down, look and see what happened. And so it said, awesome, Brisbane sound, yes. Trying to figure out what did happen here. Hey, I'm headed to Brisbane for an awesome time. Okay. And so then, why is it going? I'm going to see if I chopped some stuff off. It's basically picked out the fact that we're going to Brisbane. So it has done that sort of entity extraction, you might want to call it. It's then gone and called the get coordinates function with the name Brisbane, right? So this is its natural language understanding. And then the results have come back from that as this latitude and longitude from the actual system. Now, it's possible that you can find a large language model that will tell you the latitude and longitude for a place, but it's quite possible that it will be wrong and it will hallucinate the answer because it feels like it's right. But this is actually from a source of truth. So it's gone and grabbed that. Then we've moved on to step 2. So with step 2, that latitude and longitude would go back to the large language model, and we have to sort of pass all the way through here. It will say, okay, I got the coordinates for Brisbane. Let's look up the current weather conditions there. It's having a conversation with itself. We didn't see this text, but this is why, yes, chatbots are not everything, but internal chat still is important. So it's come back and it said, right, I now need to call the current weather function, and it's going to pass in the latitude and longitude that it's just got out from that previous call. And then it's going to get that information back, and there it's got the current weather. And that's how the service responded. And then ultimately, if I can scroll down, why can't I scroll down? It's going to take that information and convert that into a natural language response, which is this response that we saw, which is right there. Now, in this particular case, it didn't confirm the time or anything like that. And if we asked the question in a different way, maybe it would have used that as well. But it orchestrated its own way through that problem. In a simple kind of scenario, maybe, but just imagine customer service. Imagine, I don't know, support for an open source project or whatever. The agent with these guiding principles of the prompts that we provided for it can go and perform essentially these mundane tasks, and it can connect in with external truth to be able to make things happen. And look, we were grabbing data there. What about if we call out to an API to go and, well, the typical one is book a flight, book a hotel. Yeah, but we don't all do that all the time. I don't know, set off a firework, do something, reach out to the outside world and do something. You could do that too. Anything that you can write in code, you can connect an agent to it and through an action, get it to go and do it. So
And
Yeah,
despite
super.
despite the fact that this appears as a chatbot, this can
Yes.
be automated in the background. This can be systemized, programmed, whatever you
Yeah.
call it. For example, if you wanted to create a safety system for ski slopes, is it going to be too snowy or not enough snow? Again, that's something you could pick up from the weather predictions of an agent of some variety, maybe.
Sure.
Another idea.
Definitely. Look, anything, the real sweet spot here is anything where you've got a non-deterministic input. So that's why chatbots are so useful for this kind of demonstration. But a non-deterministic input, which results in something happening, and you can give it. I mean, it could. I mean, you could just come into this bot and ask it what the time is, and it would say, fine, I know how to do that. I've got a tool to do the time. You could ask it what the weather is, or you can ask it what to wear. Lots of flexibility, and I've not written the logic to be able to say, well, if the user says this and if the user says that, blah, 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 it figures it out for itself, which is, I think, super exciting.
Cool. Love it. Thank you for the insight today, Mike, and thank you for joining us on the sounding board. I think to close off, a quick summary of what we've talked about today. It's Gen AI. It starts off with a chatbot, but ultimately, by the end of it, it's going to be very important in some of the things that we do, a lot of the things that we do in everyday life, and it's something that can't be ignored at the moment. Mike, anything else?
I've just pasted the link because I hadn't given it to you before, and I apologize for that. I've just pasted the link in an internal chat for you for the GitHub repository for where that code exists. Updated just a few short hours ago when I made some changes to the code. So if you do want to have a go with that Outfit Assistant, you can. You do need to get an API key for a free API key for the weather thing. The documentation tells you how to do it. But if you don't want to do that, it's fine. Just you get to see the code and how it was all put together. And hopefully that goes some way towards answering some of those questions that we're having about agentic workflows. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you. Next week, next Friday, we will be having a conversation with a couple of AWS ambassadors all about Gen AI and again, more use cases and very much talking about Gen AI and where it's going as well from another angle. So today we have the angle from Mr. Mike Chambers, AWS DevRel, and me. But next week we'll be talking to some ambassadors who come from the partner ecosystem, where they see lots of customers on the ground and what use cases they've been thinking about and seeing. How to get involved? If you want to get involved in the sounding board, we're not just about Gen AI. We're about anything, serverless technologies, code, whatever it is. If you've got something you want to learn about or something you're struggling with, then click on the link in that corner. Mike, it's on your side of the board.
Oh, it's up here, folks. It's up here.
Click on the QR code.
My link's done up there. Yeah, I'll do it. Okay. I'll be there.
So if you click on that, it takes you to a form, fill out your questions. What is it you want to learn about? And we'll get it on air. And sometimes we encourage you to come and join us on air to talk that through as well. Maybe it's the sounding board. It's rubber duck debugging. It's ultimately how to get answers out of, I don't know. Awesome. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Mike, once again for joining us on the sounding board. It's been an absolutely awesome hour and a half. And if you are watching us on the restream tomorrow morning, then in the US, then please leave some comments below somewhere in either LinkedIn or YouTube. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.